Good evening, everyone. My name is Alyssa Karpinka. I'm the events coordinator from McNally Robinson Booksellers in Saskatoon. Tonight's event is coming to you from Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis nations. Special hello to anyone joining us through the live stream from home. For those of you who are here in person, thank you for joining us. While masks are not required, they're encouraged, and if you'd like a mask and didn't bring one, we can provide it for you. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Saskatoon launch of Same Ground, Chasing Family Down the California Gold Rush Trail by Russell Wangersky. Thank you to Russell for being here tonight. I'd also like to thank ECW Press for working with us to create this event. We have a very special guest host for the evening, Marina Endicott. She's joining us tonight for a conversation with Russell. And now we will hear from them, followed by a brief Q&A and book signing over in that corner. Please give Marina and Russell a warm welcome.
So Russell came to Saskatoon, and some of you may know him mostly as the new editor of the Star Phoenix and the Regina New Post. But beyond his journalism, he's a nationally respected writer. Both 7 books of fiction and nonfiction. His first book, The Hour of Bad Decisions, was longlisted for the Giller Prize. I loved his novel, Burning Down the House, and the short story collection, Whirl Away. I wasn't sure what to think of his return to nonfiction with his latest book, Same Ground, Chasing Family Down the California Gold Rush Trail. My theory is you just wanted to get back to that country of the subtitle colon, where they let you write about real things. Is that what happened?
It isn't a discipline. Whenever I'm writing fiction, I wish I was writing nonfiction because I think it's easier. Whenever I'm writing nonfiction, I wish I was writing fiction because it's easier to write whatever you wanted. I, at one point with this book, suggested to my publishers, it might be better if I fictionalized it instead, while keeping the diary accurate, which caused pandemonium, because they had no idea how they could possibly shelve it in a bookstore anywhere.
Oh, see, I think that would have been brilliant, but I'm sort of glad you didn't do it. But I think would have really put it in 7 places in the bookstore. That's it.
That's it.
Put it everywhere you should. Travel, fiction, nonfiction, diary, memoir, comic book.
I even had a book in self-help. I mean, that's
That's really what to aim for. So in 1849, at the age of 22, Russell's great-great-grandfather William Castle Dodge crossed the continent in search of gold, wrote a diary of that journey, and 160 years later, Russell gets his hands on it. And of course, on a very reasonable impulse, decides to retrace the trail west, perhaps maybe even at the beginning, thinking you'd make a book out of it. Or was it not that kind of exercise? Did you just want to go on a trip?
No, I did want to go on a trip, and it was a fantastic trip, so much so that we went back 2 more times to find more information and to actually find the end of the book. So I won't tell you what that is. But it was a sort of a weird thing. It started out with regrets. After I started writing books, my parents were very, very supportive. And my father kept coming back to me with this diary. He said, you should read this diary. It's a really interesting diary. You should get this diary published. It wasn't even a member of his family. It was my mother's family, the Dodges. And he had obtained a handwritten copy of the diary, and he had typewritten it, transcribed it, made sense out of some of the parts that were confusing. Because in 1849, there was a fascinating style of abbreviation and punctuation that takes a little getting used to. I mean, my great-great-grandfather would identify a character by their last name, Inglesby, never tell you their first name. And then throughout the rest of the diary, he'd call him capital letter I. My father went through and sorted a bunch of the stuff, and there's also shorthand for rivers in various locations. And then my dad passed away, and I hadn't read the diary, and I hadn't published it anywhere. And then I thought I should.
The burden that our fathers leave us.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And it's every single thing from coffee pots you heard when you were a child too, a colander with the bottom punched out of it. Why am I doing it? But this was something that I wanted to make into a book. And my idea was that we would follow the same route and see what happened. But I'm a master of planning small things really well and planning big things not at all by just denying that they're going to take place. And that's why it's kind of special to be at McNally Robinson, because as we departed on this trip from Winnipeg to go to first Chicago and then Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, Leslie stopped into the Winnipeg McNally Robinson and bought a road atlas. The map that we had was one of these huge all America in one book, where you drive to the edge of page E35 and there's a line that says start again on S52. So while you're trying to not crash the car, the navigator is flipping through pages trying to find out whether you turn or not. We took turns now. So McNally Robinson was sort of the start, and it was actually travel Alcove in Winnipeg where said atlas was found. I was here for a book launch a couple of weeks ago, and I looked over to see if in fact there was an all roads atlas, but not this time. So, well, we kept ours, so we're ready to get lost again in other parts of the United States.
I think the interweaving of your own experiences and William Dodge's experiences is well, of course, it's my favorite part of the book. It's why the book really exists, is that beautiful meshing of what you saw so many years later. Would you read a little section from the beginning and let us in on the journey, just to set us off?
And how it unexpectedly happened? Because at some point, you actually need a theme for a book for some reason. All right, I'll take off my glasses because I'm so bad. We met up with 4 generations of the matrilineal Urquhart line on a small flatland farm framed by trees near Cypress River, 2 hours west of Winnipeg. Past Rathwell and Traherne in Holland, you turn right on a dirt road just past the weather recording station on Highway 2, if that's any help. It's Valerie and Mark's farm, the place they and their son Isaac, and their horses, pigs, and chickens call home. It's a small acreage, a corner cut off huge blocks of open industrial farmed land that's planed flat for ease in planting. Theirs is a more traditional island in a tilled sea. And on that island, the disparate family gathers. The younger cousins spool around in packs, brought together from Manitoba, Saskatchewan, even from Newfoundland. Individuals not always in regular physical contact with one another, but somehow able to pick up the pieces and slip into their familiar places as easily as putting on a sweater. The adults spread out more, less concentrated, but every bit as connected. Relatives picking up where they last left off. Family and familiar, 2 words with the same root. Mark has built a massive pile of wood for a bonfire when night falls, a pile easily 25 feet high in the center of a field by the chicken coop. The chickens running around. A sheep named Gordon Ramsay, more pet than livestock, moves through the throng, occasionally butting people with its hornless head. The younger cousins feed the 3 huge pigs between fall apples, laughing at the pigs' snorting delight. The horses, along with the pigs, and the special chickens that have names are family too. I should indicate that the meat chickens do not have names and they are not family. The bonfire wishes to life after a barbecue. The flames, huge and devouring, with showers of sparks shooting into the skies. A half circle of lawn chairs formed up on the windward side. Cool September night wind at your back, but your face flushed with the heat. The air is full of shared stories. Stories started by one cousin, corrected by a sister, completed by another. The definitive version of each story is a conglomerate, an accepted mash of different perceptions of the same events. The night runs late, very late, and we toss our beer cans and bottles deep into the lava red center of the fire, where the glass crackles explosively and the cans wrinkle and disappear. Leslie and I are sleeping in a pop-up tent trailer, where the absolutely most important final duty of the night is to kill the last of the whining, hungry mosquitoes before turning off our flashlight. Later, a distant prairie thunderstorm will rumble and flash its way across the horizon, and the skin of the tent trailer will light up and darken, while I ponder the excellent conductivity of its aluminum structure frame.
But rubber tires.
Rubber tires. Oh, a metal stack. I think about something else, about the loneliness of being outside this big, comfortable family and watching it tick through all of its remembered processes in a way that's novel to me, familiar to everyone else, or so it would be. I essentially stopped living at home at 16 when I left Halifax, Nova Scotia, for high school in another province. The family home became a visit, lengthy sometimes, but a visit just the same. Leslie misses her extended family keenly when she's away from them. We lived almost a half a continent away from the largest collection of them then. I don't feel the same tug and wonder in its absence. Leslie and I had originally planned to hitch a lift from Winnipeg to Green Bay with the 3 oldest members of the family to start this trip, all of them in their 80s, the 2 Urquhart sisters, Leslie's mother Billy and her aunt Margaret, and Ian, Margaret's husband. Ian had an aged van with a leaking gas tank, bad brakes, and when I was last in it, an empty propane cylinder rolling around the back seat. The trio had planned to make their way to North Carolina and leave us behind along the way, but Ian, the driver, had broken his right foot and, despite dogged attempts to master the pedals with his left, hadn't managed well enough for such a long haul. For the assembled family, it will be just one small chapter in a huge volume of quirky but loving family lore that I'll only ever know in fragments. In the morning, the huge fire will be a gently smoking circle of ash, the beer bottles and cans reduced to blobs. Family will wake up as it always does. Familiar in a way where even offhand comments have history, familiar with which cousin is a morning person and which one needs 2 cups of coffee before they're even human. It's a familiarity that makes me wonder where my people are and where I have to look to find them. I've spent my life feeling like I'm on the outside of things, often uncomfortable at parties and get-togethers, always on the edges, watching all the other people who seem to interact seamlessly. I miss the idea of that. In my family, uncles and aunts are rarely more than names that pop up in obituaries. The cousins, they're out there. I know a few names. I've met some of them, and occasionally get added to email chains, but those relatives are all carried far away like dandelion seeds. And I am, I guess, looking for my great-grandfather's route, for his wins and losses and doubts on the trail, for signs of a great overarching family story and all that dust and sage. In a way, looking for my father too. Looking for that thing called family that so many other people seem to have found almost effortlessly. I don't even know where to begin.
And you begin with the diet. What year did you take that job?
2016, first like, the longest.
So you didn't go over the same trail again and again, or was it in 3 separate?
No, the first trip was all the way from Fond du Lac to, we left from Sacramento, but to the Goldfield on the American River. Actually, stand where you've been. And I mean, the funny thing about the route is the first part of the route, his diet was pretty much town to town, and it's very straightforward. But after St. Joseph, Missouri, there were no roads, there were no towns, there were a couple of forts that you could stop at, and there was essentially a known trail where you followed the wheel ruts, and that's what he did. But the Oregon and California trails are immensely popular with people who like to follow the whole trail. And you can get guidebooks, and we have a large box of guidebooks that are the absolute opposite of the road atlas. These ones are like microscopic in content, where they basically say things like, you're at trail marker X. You go 1.2 miles, look for a yellow fence, go across the cattle grade, but close the gate because we get in trouble if we don't leave the gate open. Then you drive 5 miles and then you turn north. But if you ever take a step off that trail, you're lost, completely lost, because you can't get back. You can't get back to the I-95 or anything like that. It's because all of the references in the tiny in particular. So you could get close with the big maps, and then if you were lucky, you would find these markers, which, I mean, everything in the American Western Desert is full of bullet holes. It's just a fact. These trail markers aren't like a plastic marker on the side of the road or sign. They're a T of railway track welded together with the bottom piece of the railway track buried 4 feet underground. So you couldn't destroy them with a bulldozer. And they have a little placard on them that will have a piece of someone else's diary.
Oh, yeah.
But in talking to these diary people, they discovered I had a diary that they had never seen before. And they really wanted. So,
Sorry, got a little piece of dust from the board. Probably.
that's it.
Was there anything in the diary that was difficult that you withheld?
I withheld some of the, I mean, there were a number of entries that were no food, no water, no wood to burn.
So you just condensed those.
Condensed some of those. I do put a bit of an explanation in because obviously it's 1849 and some of his views of Indigenous Americans are quite different. But at the same time, he's remarkably forward about his problems with slavery, especially slavery in the South. And as he goes through his trip, his view modifies from someone who has experienced no other life than as a sort of upper middle class kid, 23-year-old. Yeah. So he does modify his views.
Can you read us a little bit of the diary?
I will. Thank you. His, and I should say his voice is not my voice. So reading the diary sometimes feels a little odd, but this is a little bit, he's at a place called Independence Rock, and Independence Rock is a huge boulder that sticks out of the ground in the Western Desert. And for people who were crossing the trail, you had to be there by that 4th of July. Because if you were later than the 4th of July at Independence Rock, by the time you reach the last mountain range, in California, you'd be in snow. And, you know, some groups like the Donner Party didn't survive that kind of experience. So the idea was they had to be there by the 4th of July, and he was there on the 8th of July, 1849. So he was 4 days late already. Well, he made it up. You read the book. July 8th, 1849. It is large, conical, oblong granite rock, perfectly bare, except for its crop of inscriptions, which is very great. Nearly every person that passes putting his name with paint or by engraving. The sides of it are completely covered. Wishing to be as foolish as the rest, we camped just against the foot of it and proceeded to add our names to the already numerous catalog of adventurers. Several parties are camped near us. A rather romantic yet sadly tragical affair came off here a day or two since. There appears to be an old man and daughter from Missouri traveling in a company, and the daughter had 2 suitors, one of whom the father did not like and accordingly forbade her showing him any encouragement, which highly incensed the disappointed one. A day or two since, the father and both young men went out hunting, and not returning at night. Next morning, some of his party went in search of them, where they found the old man badly wounded by a shot in the back of the neck. One of the young men has not been found, and the other was putting on ahead when he was overtaken and brought back to the rock, where a jury of immigrants was called and a trial held. Though nothing could be proven for certain, it was fully believed he killed his rival and then shot the father and left him, as he supposed, dead. On the strength of this, he was compelled to leave and return to the States. He passed us today on his way back. But everything changes on the road. Since writing the above, I have learned that the case is not as stated there, but as follows. The old gentleman alluded to had with him 2 daughters and their stepmother, who was far his junior in years. There was also a Campbellite preacher who had 2 sons. This preacher and the old man's wife became rather more intimate than was proper, when it was agreed that they would kill the old man, the preacher take the wife, and the young men must take the sisters and proceed with the old man's team to California. Having made their arrangements, they invited the father of the 2 girls to go out hunting, when they shot him. Seeing him struggle, they advanced to finish their fiendish work, when he, seeing their purpose, pretended to fall back dead, whereupon they turned and fled. They came into camp as though nothing had happened. About midnight, the wounded man came into camp in a frightful condition, having received 9 buckshot in his neck and body. The men fled, but one of them was taken and after a sort of a trial delivered to the government officers, who let them go. The females, I am informed, are with the soldiers. The company taking the old man along, although it is uncertain whether he will recover or not.
I'm a bit worried about those girls with the soldiers.
Dodge doesn't have much time for the soldiers.
Yeah, and probably rightly so.
Yes,
You know, you say at one point in the book that, or maybe you said this in an interview, I can't remember, that Dodge did not intend the diary for publication.
no.
But you know, I don't, is that ever true of a diary? You always are writing a diary thinking of somebody who might read it.
At the very beginning, I wondered actually if there were parts of it, if he said that in the sense because he could have made it up. But then I started finding places where he intersected with other diaries and I felt less more comfortable. But he said he had written it just for his own personal enjoyment. And
Yeah,
for a
I
record
would
of
see
the trip.
that too, but really I'm thinking about my grandchildren reading it or somebody reading it. When you write, are you thinking about somebody reading it?
I don't know. Yes and no.
Oh my God, Russell, you make your living as a
I
writer.
know, but I think of it as I think of it as an amorphous reader that I, won't one day show up at the front door and throw it on the mat.
So it's like Salinger's the fat lady on the porch out in Omaha somewhere who's got cancer. And my mother used to always tell me this story from one of the Seymour Glass stories where Seymour says, there's this, you have to do the radio show because there's this old lady on a porch and she's got cancer and she's dying and the only pleasure in her life is listening to the radio show. So you do it for the lady, you do it for the family.
I worked in television for about 5 years and I had an executive producer who used to sit off in the corner of our news meetings and never say anything about the stories we were covering because the chase producer would tell us what we were at. And the executive producer would only sort of shake himself out of his stupor in the corner to say, I don't know what Tommy Toe and Badger would think of that story. So we were always framing our newscast around what Tommy Toe wanted, the mythical Tommy Toe who did not exist. And I always just pictured it's this large toe attached to a human with a television.
I'm thinking all the time, thinking.
And not legend things.
Well, that's probably why you're not thinking about what you're writing about, because it's a toe.
There you go.
You know, I took this trip or a trip across the United States, Midwest at least this summer. And I was really shocked by the decay of the Midwest as I remember it. About, maybe it's partly COVID, I don't know what it is from, but malls with nobody in them, no stores left, grass growing through cracks in the pavement, towns with no stores left, no people anywhere. Did you find as you went, what was your experience of just going through the towns and seeing what's the health of that area?
Prosperity exists on the highway.
Yeah, just for
Right on the highway. The Walmart is there. The Walmart has a liquor store in it now. The downtown liquor store is hanging on, but not by much. The downtowns are very dead. We saw the same thing you talked about in malls, except in the isolated ones. Like you might go to a Cabela's, which
Cabela seems to always be
could
doing
be,
pretty well.
it could be anywhere.
But we went to a huge outlet mall that we've been to many times before as we traveled, and it was almost empty. It was the Lighthouse one in Michigan. Just nothing. Nobody. Most of the stores closed. Nobody walking.
Oh, the Fond du Lac, the mall in Fond du Lac, when we got to Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, was like a set for Mall of the Dead. I mean,
Yeah.
there was literally nothing in it, and they had really upped the chances of renting it by hanging black curtains in all the closest store windows. So it was less than inviting on the whole. But I mean, you see it even in restaurants, Fond du Lac again, Shriner's Family Restaurant. 130 years in business, 100 years downtown Fond du Lac, the last 30 on the highway. And it's a functioning family restaurant because you can see the sign before you get to the off ramp. And their sign is huge for that purpose. And we have a photo album. You could just call closed motels,
Yeah, exactly.
There's a Days Inn at the interchange, but the Wagon Wheel
Or the Pink Motel.
We passed one, we didn't stay in, it was still open. It was literally hobbit houses. And we actually took a similar route on the second trip and looked for it and could not find it. We were one highway over, but it would have been fantastic to stay because all of them were little round houses with little round doors. you know,
Yeah.
but, and the hotels, motels, we used to play motel lottery. We took turns. One night it would be my turn. You go on Expedia. When you get tired, you look for a motel in a town you're approaching, take the price, and you go in and you try to get a better price than Expedia will give you. Because you can use that, you can say Expedia says you're $35. Can you do better? And if you do better, you win motel. But it meant that I think we stayed in 3 where the doors had been kicked in pretty clearly, suitors, police.
Yeah, it was definitely a writer's tour, writer's journey,
Yes.
rather than a, billionaire's visit to the West.
Well,
And because Leslie Bryan, who was Russell's wife, was along with you, it does in a way become the odyssey of the marriage, as any trip metamorphosizes into the metaphor of, oh, this is our life, and we get robbed and then we have a flat tire. And then it all works out at the end. But how was that writing about, did you think about it as you were writing, that you were also writing about the marriage, or did that just happen as a little bit of extra decoration?
I didn't really, I mean, traveling with a writer means you both are seeing things, you both are hearing things, and some things, Leslie was the first person to realize we might have died in Lava Hot Springs as we splashed around in the hot, salty water.
I've always wanted to go to Lava Hot Springs. I've seen that sign
Yeah.
so often.
Yeah.
I'm going next time.
It is, it's a wonderful little town. It has, you can stay in the alpaca guest rooms
I would.
because how could you not?
It was-
But we were in the hot springs, 3rd time of the day. We had yet to wear out our purple wrist bracelets or our welcome. When Leslie said, "That's thunder, isn't it?" Whereupon we departed the hot salty water and asked them if they closed. And they said, "Always." And Leslie said, "Well, what about?" And they were observing fools for me, literally a concrete bunker with a sliding window, and hadn't heard the approaching thunderstorm yet. So, but
no doubt they would have if you'd been deaf.
But it does, I mean, any road trip, I mean, they were fantastic trips. They really were fantastic trips. And, we did not kill each other.
Well, this is always the good thing.
It's
That's
a very
the
small
one.
car.
Yes.
By and large, it went smoothly. I mean, there was one point in the middle of the desert after we got stuck because I missed a turn, and the lovely Hyundai Sonata was perched on sage and making a delightful smoky sage smell because the car was stuck like a cork, and wild horses were looking in our windows like, "What are you doing? You're stupid." Where I put the car in reverse and trickled out, and then got back on a road and was so relieved to be saved that a big bump was coming, and I stomped the accelerator instead of the brake and did the Dukes of Hazzard car jump, but survived. Yeah, no, it was, I think we both do it again in a minute, but you probably should ask Leslie that too.
She's making sound fine to that.
Oh.
I was hoping you were going to read Chicken Hot Springs because I love that one too, but you're going to read one more piece from us, and it is Wagner Springs instead.
Wagner Springs, it's actually, at one point we had decided we were going to sleep in the desert. And we had gone a long way into the Black Rock Desert, which is where Burning Man, the giant Burning Man festival is, except when it isn't. And then the town of Gerlach is delighted because life returns to normal. And so we left Gerlach and gone to a place called Soldiers Meadow, where we saw something that I thought looked like an abandoned truck. So I had to go have a look at it. But it turned out to be a Bureau of Land Management cabin that, if you got there first, was yours for the night. And people would leave things behind. People would take things, if you needed paper towel, you could get a roll of paper towel, you would leave something. We left a rather crinkly emergency blanket and I think we left paper towel as well when we left. But this is a little bit about what that cabin was like. I was quite taken with it, actually, and would live there if that was possible. But being as there wasn't any water, it would probably be good. This is at the cabin. Later, when the air is cooling and the light is cutting down more yellow in its tone, We'll be boiling someone else's left behind potatoes in the coffee pot. And then we'll look at the wide open stars. And this is just part of the day. I haven't mentioned the welded grave marker at Wagner Springs, Harold E. Sims, 10/9/29, 12/1/99, worked across its surface in round welding rod writing. There were flint-knapped sharps from working stone into weapons all around the fence, blocking trespassers from reaching the spring itself. I haven't mentioned the pastel of the Calico Mountains, haven't mentioned the hot spring we mark as our own, or the pickups ranging fast past us on Soldier Marsh Road. Haven't mentioned the short length of the existing Applegate Trail that we walked when we were beside the Weaver Reservoir, the stacked basaltic sticks of stone, making up hills we had to win through on the dirt road slow to try and keep our tires intact. Haven't even mentioned today's small, fast blizzards like anoles, or the endless explosive hairs that burst from the sage, or the side roads we'll head for tomorrow, access roads that reach into the expanse of this reserve before we head south to head north again and reach, hopefully, Cedarville by tomorrow night. Broken bottles and crushed cans and shotgun shells, 410s and larger, the rifle bullets through signs, the trio of 9mm brass Luger cartridges I gathered up from the gravel in a space the size of my right hand. The sage or mouse holes or snake holes or rabbit holes, the huge variety of plants with spines and attitude. There's a car going by in the distance, and I hope it just keeps going. I can't see it, not even its lights, because the road is a dip cut down into the earth, so you're always driving in a gully, but I can hear its tires on the gravel in the fading light. Early on, there was a wrecked green Ford van with the completely rock-shredded driver's side rear tire and the sliding door broken off and tied on its roof. Inside, it's full of spilled beer bottles, some of them smashed from the crash. It's a clear warning about speed and sharp rocks. The miles of road and sand and dust and gravel, punctuated by small tufts of deciduous trees where the springs are. The whole place is full of discreet sounds, things you hardly catch. 2 crows just flew over us, croaking, and then an instant later, you could hear the sound of their wings, feathers working through air. It is like the sound of the slip of rope around the pulley, like the sound of poplar leaves, except stretched out long. In the absence of all other sound, you can hear each feather paired with another. The sun is just approaching the horizon, and the coyotes are howling to the south of us. I hope they're back later, that they howl and howl, lonesome howl. Meanwhile, the sun falls behind the mountain range, and you can watch the shadow step across the valley toward the other mountains to the east. The temperature keeps dropping, and though it was near 70 today, it will be barely above freezing when we retreat to bed. In the cabin, no bedding, just a wooden bed frame, but a small wooden stove with a brick wall behind it, 2 tables, odds and ends in its inventory, ranging from paper towels to peanuts to canned pinto beans. Large can, 1.13 kilogram, some Vista pinto beans with a pull tab top. Best before August 5th, 2018. There's olive oil and balsamic vinegar, a 3.7 ounce chicken of the sea pull tab can of sardines in oil, lately smoked, new and improved quality. And just one, yellow packaged Trojan condom, lubricated, expiring November 1st, 2019. A safe sex cabin, it seems, but only for that one attempt. There's a raft of tea light candles waiting to fight the darkness, a fire extinguisher, 2 brooms, the bunkhouse diary full of notes. October 11 has no name, but reads in total, left a couple of nights worth of wood, big round logs. Maybe we'll put one in just for the light and sound of it. The cabin diary is both record and confessional. Some have come upon the cabin by accident, like we have. Others picked it out as an escape, sometimes alone, other times for respite with children or lovers. Some have come back, looking for what they had when they were there before. It's plaintive yet uniting. Every word seems familiar to us, new members of this cabin family. They're grounded here. You know exactly what they mean when they talk about the light or the rabbits. You share in the familiar as you read each set of words. We don't know any of the authors by anything more than the variety of handwriting on a page, yet somehow we do. A pink contrail streaking by, the tin roof is singing, shrinking, pinging, ringing. The building is cedar on the outside, repaired recently with new and uneven shapes, tin roof, tin chimney, a horse corral on the side with its own corrugated tin rope latched door, a vault toilet off to the north across the gravel bend. The eastern mountains are all dark gray now, the last red-pink tip fading away, and the wind's jumped up cold from the east and is suddenly stronger. And the moon is a high and bright silver, the western sky light blue running down to yellow along the mountain edge, and the jackrabbits are creeping up close, working on the grass. Stray mosquitoes. Crows in the distance calling back and forth. The eastern sky pink now, aglow above the mountains. Mountains after sunset, dressed in black felt.
I think I'll just throw it open to anybody who has any questions. And Alyssa, will you let us know about any that come on the
Yeah,
internet?
yeah.
Russell, I tried hard to write books while I had a full-time job. I found it very difficult. And I'm just wondering if you have a secret, that is to say, holding down a really responsible job and writing books. How do you do it?
I have always had to write under pressure because I've been a journalist for 30 years. The last job I held in Atlantic Canada, I was writing 10 pieces a week, 4 columns and 6 editorials for the chain. So there's a lot of writing. And by the end of the day, I was pretty tired of writing. The job I'm in now is incredibly varied. It's also incredibly frustrating, and a bunch of other things. But the writing, I get to write about a column a week because that's really the time I have to write. And I write an editor's newsletter, which is much more free form, goes out on email, and I like to pretend disappears the moment it hits the ether. But it means that right now I'm sort of chock-a-block with words that I can't use in formats I can't use other places. So right now it's kind of easier to steal time. And I write in the evenings and work at night, not late night, because I'm usually up by about 6:37. And because of the nature of the office not being open yet, I'm right down in the office downstairs working. We don't have no commute, no breakfast. It's just coffee and computer. So I do get a chance during lulls to do some work. And I've always been forced by my jobs to switch on immediately. You know, I've never had the opportunity to slide into writing. For one brief period during the book, I had a grant and I took time off my job to actually write. And it was terrible because I would write really well for an hour, maybe 2. I'd be pleased with what I was doing, and then I'd be able to edit in the afternoon. It'd be a big chunk of the day where fundamentally I'd be sitting on the couch eating frozen berries and watching television because I couldn't continue to do it. I just, I would get to the end of those hours and I'd be exhausted. So in some ways this is better. I have to find time to fit it in, and I try to do a little every day, but I don't set an impossible hurdle. I'll have twice as much to do tomorrow because I won't have done any today, because it's cumulative, so that the big rock gets bigger. But that's how I did. That's the only way that I've been able to do it. Yeah.
After this journey, do you feel like you found that family that you've been looking for?
Give away the end.
It's in the book.
It's in the book. Yes, it is.
I have another question. I heard a bit of your interview on CBC on the weekend. Those rocks that you talked about, with the lava, did you snag any of those and bring them home?
We did, in fact, bring plenty of rocks home in our luggage. Our luggage was substantially heavier coming home. We actually have maybe some sort of California Trail aged tin cans, quite flat, that traveled very well. But yes, we did bring home some of those rocks. And one of the other things is my great-great-grandfather was a rock collector, and we have a box of his rocks, which are considerably more spectacular, given that he was amongst the first people looking for these kind of particular rocks. Like there's a piece of sandstone with a garnet that big in it, and there are a lot of quartz crystals sort of this size that, and there's also one that I understand is mildly radioactive, so we keep that away from the small children. But yes, we did bring them. And for anyone who's wondering, my grandfather, great-great-grandfather had said he'd reached Goose Lake in California and looked down at his mule's feet, and there were these black, round, weathered rocks. And some of them were broken open. And when you broke them open, they were a pure black glass with a yellow streak through it. And Leslie and I, looking at Goose Lake, looked down at our feet. And there they were. So we gleefully broke them open and bled a lot because volcanic glass is glass. It cuts you. So.
Dee, Elisa, you saying you got one there?
I do, but Dee can go first.
Okay.
I have a good note. So I'm kind of curious about the logistics. When you knew you had somewhere you wanted to get to, but getting there was the trick, right? So how did you organize yourselves without giving away too much what we're going to be? No, but what was the nature of the planning for these multiple trips? That
This is very embarrassing.
we didn't plan it at all.
I found out the cheapest car you could rent in Fond du Lac and give back in Sacramento. And then we had 3 weeks to make the whole, I think that part of it was 4,200 miles. And we would just literally drive until we were sick of being on the road. You know, we got to a point where we decided we were too tired. We'd find a very small town and stay in a very small motel. Or if we were lucky, stay in a very big city in a very big fancy motel for cheap, which happened once in St. Louis. It was fantastic. It was not a hotel room, it was 3 rooms. It was, the wonders of Expedia sometimes are quite something, you know. We didn't think we were getting that experience, but we did. I'm glad of it because we had just left. Where had we been the night before? The Days Inn with the Hells Angels. Yeah.
How the trip gets marked.
Yeah.
That was the flat tire. That was the days in with it.
Well, you've just
Yeah,
walked down.
I've just been on one, yeah. Elisa, do you have one?
We have one from Sean Paul Bedell in Nova Scotia. He says, would you make the trip again? Is there more to see and learn?
Yes, yes. One of the things I want to do when the pandemic is well and truly done and we really feel comfortable driving again is go to the Golden Pheasant Fire Opal mine in Utah from here. Just because you can pay $100 American and then you can pick at the Fire Opal cliff face, and anything you find that's worth less than $500 you keep, and anything you find that's worth more than $500 you have to sort of split with the mine owners. But there are a lot of, there's actually another opal mine on our route. But no, the desert part I loved tremendously. Can't wait to go back to I'm you know, St. Louis, parts of Missouri. I mean, you know, maybe not in the really hot, soupy, moist of the southern United States, but I don't think I'd have any trouble finding a pilot to go with me on the trip across the Western Desert.
When you say finding a pilot, were you the navigator, Leslie, or were you the driver?
Finding it to
I'll be the one holding it all together.
yeah. The other thing that's there's road size and there's road size. Okay, I like, you know, if you're driving on a dirt road, I like driving on dirt roads. Leslie likes driving on dirt roads. But when we get up to about 8 lanes, like Vegas or going at night into St. Louis on a road we've never been on before, then Leslie's job is to drive and my job is to hide under the dashboard and say nothing, because she's a far better driver in those circumstances than I am by miles. But we both split it up because, you know, there was a fair amount of road, and there's so much you want to see. You kind of split up the ceiling.
Yeah, when you're driving, you see a different view of the world than when you're in the passenger looking the code.
Yeah,
get back and look out sideways and think and dream and not
well,
pay attention.
and really the one thing that's taught me more than anything else is if you see something, stop. Even if you have to make a U-turn, I mean, making a U-turn with your brother took me to the largest frying pan in North America, which
You could not have missed that.
they flip the eggs with a skid steer. And then they eat the eggs.
I was driving home from Alberta this morning. And the largest flock of geese the largest flock of any kind of bird I've ever seen in my life, filled the sky. It was like they used to talk about passenger pigeons. I couldn't believe it. And did I stop and take a photo? No,
You
because
should,
I'm an idiot.
well, not an idiot, but you should stop.
Oh, yeah, you should stop.
I have to admit, just 2 weekends ago, I took a U-turn, take a photograph of a dead coyote because I've never seen it before.
Never seen a coyote or never seen a.
Never seen a dead coyote. No, so I stopped on my exciting trip to the Gardner Dam.
It's good. That's a good. Trip.
It is. Everybody should see the Gardner Dam.
Pretty empty. Right?
Well, I was just fascinated by the spillway. It's just so huge. Yeah. So, I like big engineering. I'm always fascinated by big engineering. It takes a long time to do.
What's the Tennessee Valley Authority one? What's that? The Hoover Dam. Do you want to into the Hoover Dam?
No, but we did see Lake Mead, the back end of Lake Mead.
Oh,
And when it was already low enough the last time we were there, you could see what they call the bathtub ring. And apparently now it's much lower, and they're finding the remains of monsters and barrels. Nothing is forever.
thank you so much, Russell, for giving us this really good taste of the book. And I know that people will be wanting to talk to you inside it. So I should let you go. Unless you have anybody else, Lisa.
No more.
Oh, sorry, one more question. Sorry. Hello, how are you? Joanne Gerber.
Oh, hi, Joy. I used to struggle with it a lot more in journalism when I was not writing columns and editorials, because opinion writing gives you much more room to use color, brightness, and I always used to think that you send a reporter out to do a news story or to do a feature, and they're professional eyes and ears, and they're wasting them by not letting them write about everything they see. But reporters are always worried that what they see and the way they see it is going to color their coverage. So in an attempt to be objective rather than addressing their own kind of subjectivity, they like to strip things clean. And when I was reporting, that was an issue for me because I would have stuff taken out of stories by editors. But no, writing opinion writing gave me much more. I mean, you make your arguments in mysterious and cheaty kinds of ways through description and color and what you see and smell. And also, it just feels like a waste to me not to be able to use that. So even if I'm working at, there are things that I've worked on in journalism that have then ended up as short stories simply because the story was too good. Well, this is sort of a strange answer. The story was too good and the ending was too bad. In journalism, you never get a tidy ending. You never get the success you want at the end of the story. The good guy doesn't win, the bad guy doesn't lose, but they should. Everything goes in the right direction. The good guy should win. Well, then you take that and you turn it in a way into the story. Not exactly the same, but you take the structure and the framework and you at last get the satisfaction of letting the good guy win. Although To be honest, in my case, usually the bad guys end up doing a lot more than the good guys. But there's a satisfaction in the completion of doing that. So it feeds. And the other thing is journalism gets you out everywhere into all kinds of different places, seeing all kinds of different things. Things often beyond your comfort zone, generally. Have to ask people embarrassing questions. And they answer, which is a marvelous thing, because you have suddenly tools to work with that you didn't have before you started asking questions. So that's how it's been for me. But I know what you say. I mean, it's difficult for journalists to cross into, especially writing descriptively, unless they're real feature people like Ian Brown at the Globe is a real kind of crazy feature writer. I can't see him ever writing without description, even if you send him to cover the Santa Claus parade. Which would be fun.
You get anybody else there, Lisa?
No, that was the wrong one there.
Well, thank you again. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Russell, for letting us hear some of this beautiful book.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I'll just say thank you both so much for being here. It's been lovely. We'll have a book signing just over on that side there. For another round of applause to you. You can actually grab them here. Feel free to get them signed and then just get them for just okay. There. Thanks.
He does.